Hello and welcome to Spoken Like a Native podcast. My name is Diane. I'm an English teacher from Scotland and a devoted language learner, and this podcast is for those learning English to improve their listening and vocabulary, with episodes on engaging topics like culture, current events, history, and how languages work. If you want to improve your speaking and listening, head over to speakmeters.com, where you can take part in small group conversations hosted by native speakers. This is an amazing way to boost your fluency, expand your vocabulary, and increase your confidence by practicing with qualified, certified, and selected native speakers who really enjoy helping people. There are sessions at a range of levels for English, French, Spanish, and German, so book your first session today. Speakmeters.com. And don't forget, you can take part in this podcast by telling me your ideas for topics. Information about how to get in touch with us is in the description. Enough beating around the bush, let's get this episode underway. So this is episode number 6 of Spoken Like a Native. If you listened to the previous episode, you will hopefully remember that we have an interview with Sarah. This is part 2 of that interview. Sarah told us about how she ended up moving from the UK to Australia, to Paris, changing jobs, and there was a bit of a quiz. So up to the point that we are at the beginning of this part of the interview, Sarah was describing how she ended up becoming an English teacher. So basically, why was she in France and what happened then? I think one thing that you can get from listening to this interview is probably the contrast between the way that I speak and the way that Sarah speaks. The point of which is just to show you that there's no one standard way of speaking. Even within Britain, we're both British, there are different regional accents. I'm from the southeast of Scotland, although I spent a lot of time in my childhood abroad, and I also moved to Cambridge and also lived in London. As a result of that, my accent is a bit of a mix of different influences. Sometimes it's a bit hard to place, but I think you can hear some Scottishness in there. Sarah, on the other hand, is from what's called one of the home counties, Kent, which is one of the counties surrounding London. And so for the part 2 of this interview, I'll just let the interview run and then I'll butt in every now and again to explain things. So at the beginning, we're talking about the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown. Yeah, my impression was that because I was in Cambridge at that time, so we kind of had a lockdown, but it was the UK one was a little bit lax if you compare it to other countries, and we got the impression from France especially that it was quite tightly policed, and also Italy as well. I think it was quite strict. Here we have a contrast between 2 adjectives, lax and strict. So it's about how strongly are the rules being regulated. If it's lax, you don't need to worry so much. It's a bit more easygoing. If it's strict, you need to worry. So was it fairly strict? Were you being controlled where you went at all times? Yeah.
In fact, we had to take paperwork with us and proof of who we were all the time. And I actually and you're only allowed to go out for 1 hour a day and not allowed to go further than 1 kilometre from your home. And
yeah, I heard about that.
I actually got stopped by the police on several occasions just to be checked.
Mm-hmm. So have you got a French residency then?
I have got a carte de séjour, yes.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't any issue about paperwork or anything? Was it quite easy to sort of transition to living in France?
No, it was not easy at all.
Okay.
It was really difficult. No.
So were you living permanently in France at this time, or was this...
So no, we weren't. We were living in the UK. But we bought this apartment in Paris and we were going over here for long weekends.
Right, okay.
And then the lockdown came and we knew that Brexit was coming.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, we set about getting residency.
Do you think that you'll stay in France permanently now?
We would like to, because once we have stayed here for 5 years, that's when we can start the procedure of getting a French passport and French citizenship.
I think you were getting on how did you end up teaching English?
Oh, right, yes. So when I first went to the, as part of the citizenship, the residency, carte de séjour procedure, you have to go and you've got to prove that you're not going to be a drain on society. You've got to prove that you've got somewhere to live, that you've got enough money to live off.
Yeah.
And whilst I was there having my interview, the lady said to me, I wasn't working. And the lady who took my interview said, so, okay, great, I see all of this. And now show me your fiche de paie, your pay slips. I said, oh, I don't have any, but I do have a letter from my husband, who's a lawyer, who said that he's going to take care of me. And she said, I don't like this idea.
Okay, so you're not working...
I wasn't working at that stage in France. I didn't have a fiche de paie. And so she went away and said, oh, we will give you a 1-year card, but when you come back to renew it, I want to see your fiche de paie. So I tried to get a job in PR, but failed. And someone said, why don't you do something that you are actually good at? I said, what's that? They said, well, when you speak English to me, this is a French person, you have a very clear way of speaking and you are easy to understand. Why don't you apply for a job as an English teacher?
Okay.
So I thought, And then I looked into TEFL courses, and I took a TEFL course.
So what's a TEFL course? TEFL, pronounced TEFL for short, stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. So if you want to work as a teacher of English, you have to do at least one course. There's varying levels of complexity, but that's the basic you have to do, is at least one course in TEFL.
Applied for a job teaching English, and it was extremely easy to get an English job.
Do you think that was because they were looking for native teachers?
Yes.
Yeah. If you've got a clear voice and you've got some kind of qualification and you're a native speaker abroad, I think it's very highly sought after. So do you enjoy the English teaching?
I absolutely love it.
Okay, why? Why do you like it?
Because I love chatting to people.
Do you do groups or one-to-one?
I do both. I do one-to-ones with children. I do one-to-ones with adults, and I do groups with adults.
Okay. Did you do your TEFL course online then?
Yes.
Okay. So it was like a kind of unplanned move in a way. Circumstances helped you to decide to relocate to France. Is that right?
Yes, but also both my husband and I were not Brexit supporters. We were very much Remainers.
Okay. So you wanted to make sure that you weren't going to be stopped from being able to be in Europe.
Yes.
So we have Brexiteers and Remainers. So the people who supported Brexit, who thought that Britain should leave the European Union. This was after the referendum in 2016. I remember it well. So people who wanted to leave the EU are called Brexiteers. Well, people who wanted Britain to stay in were called Remainers. So Sarah is saying that she and her husband were Remainers.
Yeah, I think that's quite. I've heard that from several people trying to find their connections. Do I have a relative somewhere? Can I, buy a property somewhere?
Yes, but buying a property isn't enough.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a European citizen husband, so I just had to get married. Well, I didn't have to, but it's helpful to get married, and then the residency process is a little bit easier. But we've only been in Spain since it was April last year. So, and I spent some time during that time in Scotland as well. It takes some time to adjust to a different country. But I guess you were already quite familiar with France already.
Yes.
How about how good is your French? Are you really comfortable and able to say whatever you want?
No, I am not entirely fluent. My understanding is very good. My speaking is B2++ /C1.
Okay.
However, I think that I speak French very well.
So Sarah is talking about the levels of a language. This is for every European language, but I'm sure you can apply it to different languages that aren't in Europe as well. So a beginner would be at A1 or almost 0 below. Then you go from A2, B1, and at B1 you're a solid intermediate, B2 you're upper intermediate, and then if you get to C level you're advanced. So Sarah says that she's almost at advanced level in speaking French.
But within the first breath I take, people know that I'm English.
Why? How do they know?
I don't know. But I might go things like, alors, and they go, oh no, oh, elle est anglaise, oh la la.
So do people, what happens when people realize that you're not a French person?
If they know how to speak English, they will speak to me in English.
Yeah, even if their English is much worse than your French.
Because they want to practice their English and they want to show how good they are. And quite often I will say things like, oh, j'habite en France. Il faut que je pratique.
And what do they say?
They go, oh, c'est mignon. Oh la la, c'est mignon.
Yeah, it's strange, that reaction, because although I'm not in a big city, but if anyone knows that, I've had encounters with people who they know that I'm not Spanish, although I speak Spanish quite well. It's quite clear that I'm not Spanish, more for like attitudes and behavior than actually or how I look, more than the actual language itself. But if you say that you're an English teacher and they're like, oh yeah, I should really improve my English, because everyone in Spain wants to have good English because it's required a lot in lots of jobs. But you say, okay, we can chat, because I'd be like, at that point I might be completely fed up of speaking Spanish, and I'd be like, yeah, we can speak English if you want, and they just shut up. They're like, yeah, I should, and they just start to feel really uncomfortable, and they'll say like one sentence and they get embarrassed, so they switch back to Spanish. And but you can understand it, because in Britain, like, it's very difficult to get people to speak foreign languages, really, I think.
No, they're hopeless.
Yeah. So if you don't have to do it, this is what I was saying in one of the podcast episodes that I've been recording about myths about British people don't want to speak other languages, or they're xenophobic, and they want everyone to speak English. But if you think if English is the language of business, it's the lingua franca, then of course, like, if you're not forced into it, speaking another language is very difficult.
Yes.
So whereas if you're Spanish, if you're Chinese or whatever, like, they have it drummed into them from an early age, you should have some, it's going to be useful for your career, for your earning power. But I think, I don't know, maybe your experience of learning languages was different from mine, but I felt it as if it was, it's just something nice, something extra that you can have. Maybe those, you're kind of a weirdo if you're really into languages, but it's not necessarily very important.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I loved the fact that I was good at French at school. And after school, I took on extra French lessons. And then, of course, as you heard, I went to the Sorbonne to improve my French even more. And no, but it is unusual. But I've been really surprised now that I work with all of these adults, and I've worked with several companies where they have said that even though they might have an office full of French people, the official language in their company is English. So they all have to be able to write and speak English.
Yeah, I used to work at business English school, and all the students were like, they would be so, oh, my English is so terrible, but at least they could say something and they could communicate, even if it was quite basic. And you think that a majority of, British people, American people, they say one word in another language and they expect to be, given a pat on the back. They can say, hola or bonjour, and they think, that's enough to show that you've learned something. But there's this kind of embarrassment factor about it, I think.
I think they should be embarrassed.
Yeah, why?
Because you should at least try a bit harder than bonjour if you're coming to France, even if it's just for a vacation.
Yeah.
You don't need to be able to have a proper conversation, but you could say something like, bonjour, je voudrais un croissant, s'il vous plaît.
So is the reaction generally quite positive to you as a foreigner?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. What about, have you felt any kind of culture clash moments that you've had? Many times you felt, there's something kind of, longing for England or for Australia, in terms of like, there's something very different about the French or the French culture.
I found odd things along the way, such as knowing what to take when you are going to somebody's house.
Okay.
No. And knowing what is the most appropriate thing to take or not take. So finding the balance and getting the balance right has been a learning experience. I don't know if it's the same in Spain, but they have a phrase here in France about they don't want people to arrive avec des mains vides, with empty hands.
I'm not sure about the conventions, but yeah, I think often people will bring something, like they might probably bring a dessert. It's probably the most common thing, or something to drink. Not that I've been at dinner parties. We're not really a dinner party kind of couple, but yeah, no, I haven't had too much of that experience. What I was going to say. What about when you went from England to Australia? Is there a big cultural shift there?
Between England and Australia?
Yeah.
Well, there was a little bit, in that I couldn't for the life of me find a boyfriend in Australia.
Okay.
They all just thought that because of the way that I speak, they thought that I was the Queen of England.
And they didn't like that?
They didn't find it very sexy.
Oh, okay. Do you think the Americans would like it?
I think they might do. But
strange.
By contrast, when I arrived in France, it was almost as if a memo had gone out saying cute British woman wanted, and they were almost queuing up at the airport.
So French guys like English women.
Yes.
Oh, is it? Do you think it's just is it like a poshness thing, or is it just speaking English, or what is it? Do you think
They seem,
like?
you know how we English people find a French accent very attractive.
Yes.
It turns out the French men find the English accent when an English person is speaking French very attractive.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I speak French as well, but it's always been more of a for fun. I've done a lot of conversation exchanges and things, so it's never been in a romantic context, because I only started speaking French when after I was already with my partner. But in Spanish, my partner says that it's like it's a personality shift, because I speak very well, but it's almost like I have a different type of voice, because I sound more confident in English. A bit more, I don't know, mature, because obviously it's my first language, and I teach the language, and even though I'm Scottish, I've had a very kind of elite type education. Whereas when I speak Spanish, he says, "Oh, you sound like a little girl." It sounds quite cute and sweet, because the way that Spanish women speak, they have a bit more of a lower tone of voice when they have that. Is there a difference in the tone of voice, do you think, between English
yes, there absolutely is. And I remember when I was with my French fiancé, at that stage my French wasn't as good as it is now, and so I wasn't so talkative. And I used to say to him, "Your friends must think that I am absolutely incredible in bed, because otherwise, why on earth would you be seeing me?"
Yeah.
Because I sound like a little child with the vocabulary that I had.
Yeah. Yeah, it was always funny. Like, I don't know, did your parents ever meet your French boyfriend?
Yes.
What did he speak English?
Well, when we first got together, he spoke halting English. And the way that we were together, I let him make many mistakes, and I only corrected the most urgent ones. He corrected me at every single mistake, which halted my progress, I believe.
Yeah.
And now he can speak fantastic English.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good point. Like, you have to have a good balance between correcting and encouraging someone to keep speaking. Yeah, because I was going to say, like, the impression of your parents or your family or your friends, because I feel like that in Spain, as being a British person in the kind of Spanish, it sounds like you're probably a lot more chatty than I am. I'm quite introverted, and then I'm with a big group of Spanish people, and they're talking away, and I'm kind of waiting for a gap, and it never comes. In Spain, it just doesn't come. But then the inverse of, like, when my family meets my husband, and he's extremely polite and trying to say everything correctly, and it's kind of it's funny when you see the different side of your partner when they meet. Obviously, because my parents can't speak Spanish, you can't have that fluency there. It's a strange. But your current your husband is English.
Yes.
And does he speak French as well?
Perfectly.
Oh yeah, you said he studied at university.
And his father was a French teacher.
Ah, okay. Great. Well, I think I'm going to have to let you go in a second. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish?
I think we should let everyone take a breath, and because I could keep on talking and talking and talking and talking and talking.
And that, dear listener, is where we ended it. So I think Sarah and I will probably have a follow-up conversation at some point in the future on different topics. I hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned a lot about what it's like to live in another country, our reflections on teaching English, on learning other languages, being in Europe as British people. So I hope you liked it. Please, if you're listening on an app that allows you to leave a review, I think on Spotify you can give a rating out of 5. Please rate 5 out of 5. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, I think you can write a review. If you do so, that would really, really help get more visibility. If you have any suggestions about topics or any feedback, good or bad, there will be some contact details in the description field, so have a look down there. New features coming up soon is going to be transcriptions of the episodes. And what else is coming up? What else do I need to tell you? Oh yeah, so the next episode I think is going to be a part of an interview with Nelly, who's from Côte d'Ivoire, who speaks very good English, and about her experience of being an immigrant in France, which I think will be really interesting. Well, I know it's interesting. I've already listened to it. And I'm thinking of doing an episode about different types of culture. So anyway, as I said, please share this episode if you enjoyed it. Please leave a review. Also, remember to go over to Speak Meters, and that's a great place for you to find lots of different sessions to practice English, to practice French, Spanish, and German. More languages hopefully to come in the future. If you get more people who are willing to speak a different language, that would be amazing. So just go over to speakmeters.com. And that's it for today. So see you next week. Bye. Thanks for listening. What do you think about today's topic? Remember, you can get in touch by leaving a comment or by joining the Speak Meters community. Follow Speak Meters on Instagram and subscribe to Spoken Like a Native on your favorite podcast platform. You can also leave a comment and like the stream. Please leave a review. It really helps us to find new listeners who are looking for fun language learning content. And lastly, don't forget to head over to speakmeters.com to take part in live conversations hosted by friendly native speakers. That's all for today. Catch you next time. Bye.